Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, is respected and revered by many people across the country. This is particularly true for the people of Illinois. Illinois is considered Lincoln's home state, where he spent most of his young adulthood and where he first entered the legal and political systems. Illinois is considered to be the land of Lincoln. It is understandable, then, that the University of Illinois would have a strong affection towards Abraham Lincoln. One of the most significant ways this admiration was demonstrated was in the creation of Lincoln Hall, one of the memorials to Abraham Lincoln on campus. The creative process behind Lincoln Hall is a captivating one. Throughout the project, representing Lincoln informed many of the building's design decisions. Lincoln was portrayed through the hall artistically on the exterior of the building, by terracotta panels, cartouches honoring his associates, and significant quotations from addresses he made throughout his life.
One of the significant features of the building is, since it's in memory of Abraham Lincoln, on the exterior of the building are 10 terracotta panels, and there was a professor named Green here on campus that was instrumental in selecting the points of from Lincoln's life, as well as on each side of the panels are cartouches, ovals, with the busts of people who were instrumental in Lincoln's life or involved in Lincoln's, who were contemporary of Lincoln. Joseph Medill, Jonathan Turner, Baldwin, some of these other people. And they're both national as well as state.
Each of these details were chosen strictly and precisely to depict Abraham Lincoln. Certainly, the building makes notice of significant moments in his later life, but it also focuses on his Illinois roots. The man behind the majority of these creative decisions was Everett Green. Green was a historical scholar with a passion for Illinois and American history, unmatched by any other faculty member at the university. He was the dean at the University of Illinois when the talk began of building a new university hall, and Green was described as, quote, the logical person to put in charge of the artistic and historical aspects of the building. Green was wholly invested in this project. He had his hand in the decisions regarding the architecture of the building, the specifics of the construction, which scholastic departments were to be housed in the building, and the room assignments. Green even proposed to name the building after Abraham Lincoln.
I believe there has hitherto been no agreement as to a suitable name for our new building, and I have heard none suggested which seems to me satisfactory. I now wish to recommend the building be designated as Lincoln Hall.
Green believed that turning the new building into a memorial would be fitting, because the appropriation for its construction was made in the year of Lincoln's centennial, and that the departments to be housed in the building would be literature, history, and politics to reflect Lincoln's own interests. His case was persuasive, because from then on, all plans referred to the building as Lincoln Hall. Once the building had been named, Green's artistic and historical duties took on a whole new meaning. The building was to have quotes from significant speeches displayed on the exterior walls. Panels depicted scenes from Lincoln's life. The names of his associates would be forever honored in cartouches in each corner. Through these decisions, Green and his collaborators defined the memory of Lincoln at the University of Illinois by selecting which parts of his life to include and which to leave out.
100 years ago, when this building was built, people needed Lincoln to do different things, but they needed him to do things for them as well. So they needed him to, point out how important Illinois was. They needed him to validate what was going on in American politics in the early part of the 20th century. And so they were using Lincoln for their own purposes, just like we do today.
Greene crafted an image of Lincoln. He chose specific scenes from Lincoln's life to be depicted in terracotta panels. 4 of the 10 panels depicted scenes from Lincoln's life in Illinois, thus putting emphasis on Lincoln's roots. With regard to the future president's physical features, the Lincoln of Lincoln Hall was not only an Illinois Lincoln, but a pre-presidential Lincoln, and yet unworn and unaged by the trying years of the Civil War.
Lincoln Hall overall, and that bust in particular, emphasizes Lincoln before the presidency. And visually, the way you know that is because he doesn't have a beard. I mean, the beard really marks the presidential Lincoln. And so anything without a beard is pre-presidential, and that's Illinois' Lincoln. And so one of the things that Lincoln Hall really does is emphasize Lincoln in Illinois.
Greene carefully chose the quotations that would go on the side of the building, and which of Lincoln's associates would be honored in the cartouches. These unique elements reflected Lincoln as an Illinois politician and as our nation's president. Greene and the university's president at the time, Edmund J. James, chose the names for the cartouches by constructing 2 lists.
In such a way that it shall not only include the men of greatest influence and achievement, but so that it shall also fairly represent the different elements in the political life of Illinois during that time.
It appears that Greene took particular interest in the Illinois list. He requested input from Jesse Palmer Weber, the secretary and librarian from the Illinois State Historical Library. In a passionate letter to the president of the university, Greene spent pages writing his rationale for why each man should be honored on the cartouches. Yet in his letter, only 3 sentences were devoted to the 9 men that would be honored on the national list. Through this work, a specific image of Lincoln, an Illinois Lincoln, was created in the construction of Lincoln Hall. Quotations were chosen, portraits drawn, and associates identified that shaped a legacy of Lincoln that the university could call its own. An Illinois Lincoln that was also a very public Lincoln.
It talks more about Lincoln as a public person. So, for example, in the reliefs, the sculptures that are mounted on the outside of the building, the quotations and the words that from Lincoln that are presented there, those are presented as part of Lincoln's public life. So we don't get stories of his family. We don't get images of his wedding, for example, on the outside of Lincoln Hall. We get the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And so the Lincoln we get, the picture of Lincoln we get, is really a collective public Lincoln. And one of the features of a public memorial in general is that it tells the collective public what we should remember about a person.
To be sure, Lincoln was a far more complex man than can be portrayed by any one public memorial. Of the thousands of memorials to Lincoln in the United States and elsewhere, each provides a different perspective on this most studied leader.
He can be anything we want him to be. So one of the things that I found really interesting about studying Lincoln is that Lincoln is figured in lots of different ways. Sometimes he's framed as the savior of the Union, sometimes he's framed as the great emancipator, sometimes he's framed as the frontier lawyer, and all of these different ways that we can think about Lincoln and his life as a person on this earth reflect the desires and hopes of Americans. And so whatever Lincoln we choose to focus on, that's the Lincoln essentially that we get.